As outrage grows over the treatment of the nearly 2,000 children torn away from their families over the last few months, being kept in what the Associated Press has been calling cages, but which Breitbart assures us are just, quote, chain-link partitions, the Trump administration is doubling down on their move.
We have to do our job. We will not apologize for doing for our job.
We cannot and will not encourage people to bring their children or other children to the country unlawfully by giving them immunity in the process. Why wouldn't you bring children with you if you know you would be released and not prosecuted?
The United States will not be a migrant camp. Just remember, a country without borders is not a country at all. We need borders. We need security. We need safety.
But others argue this is not the America we know. Here's what Democratic Congressman Joe Kennedy had to tell us this morning on the radio at Boston Public Radio about his weekend visit to the border.
Doing this doesn't make America safer. Doing this doesn't actually protect our national security. All you're doing is destroying families and destroying little kids for no reason. If you weren't going to get upset about this one, then there's probably not a whole lot else that's going to be worth chiming in on.
But according to my next guest, we've gone through many trials like this before in American history of division and fear. But in each and every case, they were always overcome by what Abraham Lincoln once called the better angels of our nature. The book is The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels. The author is the Pulitzer Prize-winning Jon Meacham. John, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here. Now, I can't be like Ken Burns or Walter Isaacson, but here's my thesis on your book. It could be worse. In fact, it has been, or at least as bad, and we survived, even prospered. Is that a fair summary of what the book is?
Take that, Ken and Walter.
I thought you'd like, but that is what it is. So give me, it is hard to believe there's an antecedent to taking kids away from parents and having one of the two major parties voicing virtually no opposition. Is there?
There is. I mean, the precedent here is Executive Order 9066 in 1942, when Franklin Roosevelt interred not Japanese citizens, but American citizens of Japanese descent on the west coast of the United States on the advice of the Attorney General of the state of California, Earl Warren. So this is my message is not, you know what, we've been through this before, so relax. It's we've been through this before, let's figure out how we got out of it and apply those lessons.
So how do we get out of that? Who were the better angels and how did they operate that got us out of that nightmare?
Well, Eleanor Roosevelt was one. People protested. People were outraged by it. Wartime was different. It took too long. The civil rights movement is a great example of this. It requires steady resistance. It requires witness. It requires the powerless to keep speaking up so that the powerful will take note. I mean, one of the things you've seen with the issue at the border is you have the comfortable are absolutely sure this is the right thing to do. Yet you have this, so many members of Congress, particularly on the Republican side, who must know this is not the right thing. And they're afraid right now, politically, of their Trump-supporting base.
Even those Republicans like Susan Collins from Maine, who say they're deeply troubled by what's going on the border, are not willing to embrace the solution. What, for fear of angering the president?
And my view is, what do you want us to think about you later on? That is, your conscience is forever. A political news cycle is for 30 minutes now. And Senator Collins and others should be joining in and saying this is not what we should be doing. Somebody said this is not America. Well, it kind of is America. We have dark impulses of nativism, isolationism, racism, xenophobia, and what we have to do in every generation is fight those darker impulses.
Well, let's talk about another one of those darker impulses you focus on. Many people accuse Donald Trump of current-day McCarthyism. Yeah. You talk about real McCarthyism, and there is a thread. I'm sure most people at home know. Yeah. There was a lawyer who worked for McCarthy who also worked for Donald Trump, Roy Cohn. So tell us the story of the better angels that got us out of that.
Margaret Chase Smith, the Republican senator from Maine, gave a speech in 1950 laying out what she called the Declaration of Conscience against McCarthyism. It was prescient. She only got 6 co-signers. It took the rest of the men about 4 years to catch up, late 1954. It took 4 years. And Watergate took 26 months. These things take more time than we would like or that we remember.
But 4 years for people to catch up with McCarthy, as you just say, 26 months for to stand up to Richard Nixon to the point where he got in a helicopter and waved goodbye. But is it possible the clock is sped up in 2018? Social media, 24-hour cable news, Fox News, Breitbart, etc. Maybe we don't have 26 months. Maybe we don't have 4 years. Is that unduly pessimistic?
I think it is unduly pessimistic because speed is relative. So if you hadn't gotten newspapers in this country during tumultuous times, we didn't have social media during the Civil War. We had some problems there. The American Revolution wasn't on cable. So the rise of newspapers sped things up, radio sped it up, television changed it. The world right now seems to be moving faster. But it's a relative thing. Well,
but let me make one more attempt at this, since I'm a glass totally empty kind of person.
Yeah, I was going to say, but you have a shirt like that, though.
Thank you for your support. Here's Donald Trump on June 1 of last year making a pretty momentous announcement. Here he is.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
Now, the reason I cite that is maybe climate change won't wait. Maybe if it turns out it takes 4 years or 26 months or 8 years, maybe we reach a point where it can't be reversed. And there are other climate change kinds of things. Does that worry you, or does it not?
Of course it worries me. I mean, I wrote this book not as cultural Zoloft, but as an attempt to remind us that we should have a sense of proportion about the problems of the present, and we should learn from the past. Our greatest moments have come after year after year after year, decade after decade of important social activism. Jim Crow, I'm a native Southerner. Jim Crow lasted 100 years. Slavery lasted more than 100 years. And so, this is not a, hey, let's relax about it. It is, though, a sense of this requires changing hearts and minds. And just because we might think something is the right course, the nature of the republic is we have to convince a majority of folks that that's the case.
Well, you're not just an historian, you're a futurist, too. I read in some interview you said something like, I believe that the America of 2038 will be a lot more like the Barack Obama America than the Donald Trump America. What do you see as the tipping point that gets us there? Is it the kids at Parkman? Is it a Laura Bush kind of op-ed in the Washington Post, which I'm going to talk about more? Is it Black Lives Matter? What is that thing?
History isn't like that. It's not one thing. We tend in our minds to put things on a certain moment. John Lewis and Hosea Williams crossing the Pettus Bridge in Selma, being beaten. Hugely important. And in our narrative, our kind of movie-tone vision of history, John Lewis is beaten. Lyndon Johnson gives the speech that Richard Goodwin wrote, one of the great speeches ever. And then suddenly an era folds. And that's useful to some extent, but it's a narrative construct. John Lewis was there because Rosa Parks had gotten up. Rosa Parks was able to do that because Philip Randolph and others had been working on nonviolence, had been working toward this on and on back. I applaud Mrs. Bush for what she did. I applaud people. And I think it requires, and Eleanor Roosevelt would say this, it requires us to all do the right thing every day. And as exhausting as this is about the social media and the cable news and one damn thing after another, we have to do it. Because, as Jefferson said, we have to be participants in politics, not just at elections, but all the time.
Did I read that you've met the president once? Is that right?
Oh, President Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you speak and write about how people like Abraham Lincoln, FDR, the greatest of American presidents, had their dark moments and then evolved. Do you see evolution in this president?
I don't see it, but intellectual honesty and a sense of history, I think, requires all of us to say it's not impossible. It may be damn near impossible, but we have to work for that, because I believe that politicians are far more often mirrors of who we are than they are molders. And there's a part of that Trump support, I don't know what it is, 20%, 25%, that is reachable by reason. There's 25 or 30% that probably isn't, frankly. But 34% of the country was with Joe McCarthy, even at the very end. 40% of the country couldn't say Franklin Roosevelt's name. They called him that man. I don't think we should overly sentimentalize the past, because it does a disservice to them. It does a disservice to the people who fought and made a country. What is our immigration question? Our immigration question is that people want to come here. And what we have to be totally careful about is making sure that continues. When the president said, in what the clip you played, that a country without borders is no country, I just clicked on St. Augustine, who wants to find a country as a multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love. We have to love fair play and liberty in common. That's more important than a border.
I bet your blood pressure is half of what mine is. Nice to see you, Jon Meacham. Great book. Thank you so much for your time. The book again is The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels. We certainly hope they win out.